My music ended, and the sudden void pulled the breath sharply out of Caramel's lungs. He gazed softly at me, blind to the bonfire flickering before us, as though it was a far duller beacon than the one that I had shined upon him right then and there. "That's a beautiful tale," he murmured. "It's sad, and yet—" "You cannot have sadness without felicity," I said softly. My grin was as fragile as my next few words. "We are here now, and happy and healthy and delighted. But like a memory, even this too can fade. And I'll then share more songs with the void. Loss and love have their places in this world. We can accept them with despair or with delight. And I choose the latter, because it at least makes loss something that is quiet and serene, or I'll have known that I enjoyed the warm currents of my existence with grace and with dignity. Our days on this earth can too easily become an asylum, built by our fears and patrolled by our own regrets. We have it within ourselves to stop worrying about the towers of security we can build, and simply enjoy the sizzling bonfires erected before us right here and now. And I assure you, it's not something that's even remotely cherished on our lonesome." Caramel gulped, and his blue eyes glossed over. "Wind Whistler loves me, and I only want to love her back. But how can I love her if I don't have anything to give?" "You can give yourself," I said, strumming the lyre so that the melody of the tale could reach his ears once again. "You can give yourself, and live with her, so that the two of you can be more than just memories, and you can embrace the sunrise together, no matter how bleak the next day must seem, because you can afford to be so much, and because this world would be so much less enjoyable if you gave up something that's that precious." He smiled painfully. Something lit up at the edges of his eyes. I could recognize that bright, pale orb in my sleep, and I knew that I had been doing that for an entire solid year now. I struggled through a sudden shiver to stare at Carmel's face as he said, "Did this mad pony ever find an end to her curse?" I gulped. No, she never did. But she couldn't deny the fact that it gave her opportunities no other pony could ever enjoy. Opportunities to sing songs of things that even she realized she had forgotten herself. Still, I took a deep breath, gazing briefly into the fire. She would give up all of that intuition and knowledge, even if for a single day she could just find the stallion who had changed her life. I slowly tilted my face up and gazed deeply into his sapphire eyes, my voice blanketed by a curtain of vapor separating us like the corners of the earth. "And tell him how thankful she is. She'd tell the stallion that she'd never stop dreaming, and she would always remember him." Sparks crackled and died in the bonfire like the brief color that had twinkled in Caramel's eyes. He blinked, realizing that night had fallen, and he was alone. Everywhere he looked, thicker and thicker shadows were encompassing his vision, so he stopped paying attention to his sight and trusted his hearing instead. A beautiful tune tugged at his ears, like a morning sunrise lifting the waking foal out of bed. He turned and saw a bonfire several meters away, surrounded by laughing and celebrating Pegasi. Caramel literally jumped up to his hooves and galloped over there, like a pony possessed. A mare with sky-blue wings and a blonde mane was in the middle of chatting with a friend beside a burning pyre. Her giggling voice had the sound of bells. Caramel nearly fainted at the melodic tones as he struggled to stand upright behind her. Bravely, he cleared his throat and murmured, "Windy?" Wind Whistler turned around. At the sight of him, her wings fluttered and her brown eyes lit up. "Caramel, She lingered breathlessly, gulped, and then managed. "I thought you told me that you weren't celebrating this year." "I know what I said, but He began, but his words trailed off uselessly. He stumbled upon the precipice of confusion, his eyes gazing into the fire as if searching for the reason why he had trotted over to her. Slowly, his ears twitched, for once more he heard a timeless melody, and it softly pulled at the corners of his lips. "I was listening to some music, really sweet, beautiful music," he said, grinning now, then pivoting his gaze to drink in the image of her once more. "But it wasn't enough, because you weren't there to listen to it with me." Wind Whistler's feathers twitched at their end, and her golden tail curled in twice on itself as she smiled warmly at him. "Oh, sweetie." Her smile was as fragile as the sudden dam to her eyes. Her closest friends shuffled quietly away, giving her and Caramel enormous space. as if some ballroom dance was about to take place. I missed you too. Windy, Caramel bit his lip, his shivers returning as he was suddenly unworthy of that heavenly gaze. I was wondering if you aren't going to do anything special this celebration. Yes, Caramel. I would be happy to be Souls of Solstice with you. Caramel blinked. He glanced across the bonfire to see the grinning and winking expressions of Thunderlane and Blossomforth. With a wry smirk, he squatted down beside Wind Whistler. And how did you know that I was gonna ask about that? She leaned in, nuzzled him, and purred deliciously into his ear. Gonna prove me wrong, then? He exhaled sharply and nuzzled her back. His voice sounded like a colt's. Never. He sniffled briefly. Wind Whistler gazed into his eyes with worry. Caramel, is everything all right? His moist eyes glistened from the nearby flame. The sadness was cancelled out by a warm smile as he spoke to her. I'm just so happy to be alive with you. You're like a good dream that never ends, Windy. I'm sorry if I haven't said that enough. She smiled back at him. Well, you're saying it now, aren't you? The two of them giggled and leaned against each other, basking in the celebration's warmth. I stood just beyond the dancing amber gleam of that bonfire, playing on my lyre in the spot where I had trotted to after the moon sliced its way in between Caramel and myself. Even now I can't remember how much time had passed until the music stopped. As soon as I realized there was no more melody, I glanced down and I realized I had been hugging my instrument to my own chest. A sigh escaped my lips, sad and delightful at the same time. An instrument is only the start of a melody. It takes listeners to truly finish a composition to its end, even when there isn't an end. The tranquility of the moment was interrupted by enormous thunder. Caramel, Wind Whistler, and the rest looked up and cheered as the first of the night's plentiful fireworks lit up the purple haze of the world. Ponyville had become a strobing sensation of amber flames and rainbow-colored explosions. Ponies danced in the streets, fillies, colts, mares, and stallions alike, souls of Solstice who mutually promised their jubilant cheer to stay awake until the next morning, when it was up to their patron princess to bring forth a literal glow to the world that mirrored the prancing joy in their hearts. They were so busy with the festivities that hardly a villager noticed one pony marching through the heart of the event, a pony who was not lit up by bonfires, a pony to whom the fireworks gave no shadow. I paused halfway through trotting out of the center of town and looked over my shoulder. For a moment I saw, or thought that I saw, a trail of my own hoofprints disappearing behind me in the bright moonlight at a hauntingly even pace. Upon such a dreamlike sight, I did what only a mad pony would do. I smiled. If all I care about in life is the imprints I make on this world, then the most I'll ever leave is a grave. Lyra Heartstrings, Mad Pony, and Lunatic Dreamer, on the night of the Summer Sun celebration, the first-year anniversary of the curse. Signing off.